Good evening and welcome to another edition of Today with Dr. Wendy. I'm Wendy Patrick. My co-host Larry Dersham and I have a terrific show for you tonight. We are going to talk about everything from victims to the virus to violence, literally in that order. And in that order it is because we have so much content in each of those areas. It's almost hard to pare it down in order to simply just give you the highlights because we also want to make sure, remember, it's headlines with a silver lining. So let's start with victims. Now, every time we get ready to do one of these shows, sometimes we're tempted to say, and then there were, what, six, seven, eight, I don't know how much we're going to be up to, but Governor Cuomo continues to have some significant issues. We're not rushing to judgment, and we're certainly not going to judge him outside of a court of law. The court of public opinion doesn't get to render a verdict, although they sort of do on social media. But it is true that his concerns now seem to have struck a bipartisan tone because sexual harassment is a bipartisan issue. Ironically, it's one of the few issues that has united Congress and united citizens around the world for as long as I can remember. And I say that because I know there was a day and age where we didn't take it as seriously as we do now. And I say that even mindful of the 2017 Me Too Time's Up movements that have really caught fire and continue to do so. One of the things that characterizes Governor Cuomo's case right now is that it is being investigated. It's being investigated not just through an impeachment inquiry, but also by the Attorney General. Now, why is that important? Every sexual harassment investigation is looking for victims because patterns make the predator. We don't jump to conclusions, and we certainly don't rush to judgment, but we look for patterns. Is it a pattern of behavior or behavior as usual? If it's a business as usual type of behavior, that's especially problematic, and that constitutes some of the allegations against Governor Cuomo. But here's really what's important about that story. We all know that for sexual harassment victims, silence is not golden. And there is strength in numbers when people come forward. But in terms of what happens to the public figure under scrutiny, the one who's being accused, calls for resignation usually start coming fairly quickly. And at the beginning, there's always a bit of pushback. Nobody believes that everybody should resign anytime they're accused of anything. We're a country of evidence, and we're a criminal justice system based on evidence, not merely allegations. However, the drumbeat for Governor Cuomo's resignation has continually grown louder over the course of the last couple of weeks. It's sadly almost entirely eclipsed the very important nursing home investigation that was also going on the week before the sexual harassment started breaking. And now, because that drumbeat is coming from left, right, and center, it is as loud as can be. So, Larry, the question everyone's asking with increasing frequency from both sides of the aisle, and indeed up the center as well, is should he resign? What do you think?
I think that you want to, as you mentioned, Wendy, hear all the evidence and so forth. We're innocent until proven guilty, but this does seem like almost on a weekly basis, of almost like a daily basis. It's
daily basis.
Insurmountable evidence. And it is so unusual to see that Democrats turn on one another. Even liberal Mayor de Blasio is, I believe, asking for the governor to resign. And to me, the bigger issue is the nursing home deaths. I think it was up to somewhere around 14,000 people that possibly didn't need to pass away, but because of his policies did. This almost seems like a sub-story, but I think that I hope that the truth comes out. And I think if he's guilty of these things, he steps down for the good of New York, the state of New York, and the United States.
You know, the good thing about the AG doing an investigation is we want to make sure that things are actually documented one way or another. So we try to be as neutral as we can, although it is always persuasive that many of the victims don't know each other, or at least on the surface of it have ulterior motives. But again, we don't want to prejudge. We're the court of public opinion. Let's actually see what the AG's office does. Because remember, Larry, they have subpoena power to look at documents, to talk to people. They have the tools with which to really paint a larger picture and to put content into context. Because what Governor Cuomo is denying is the content. He's basically saying maybe I was misinterpreted, maybe I was joking when I shouldn't have been, but that's not nearly as problematic as some of the allegations standing individually. And we also talked about him sort of having suffered a 1-2 punch with the nursing home scandal and then the sexual harassment allegations. But I understand, Larry, you're also looking at sort of a three punches you're out story in an entirely different context, right?
I am, Wendy, and I actually brought it up to four punches, and
Four
you're out.
punches.
Four punches. Okay, I'm talking about the United States of America now, folks. And punch one, the carrot, the looting of the US Treasury. A 1.9 trillion COVID relief bill was just passed, and President Biden signed that into law. Only 9% of that goes towards COVID relief. 91% of that goes towards the Democratic favorite causes. Not one Republican voted on it, not bipartisan. And just get this, Wendy, just visualize this. $1 million, let's start there. $1 million, you convert the dollars into seconds. 1 million seconds equals about 11 and a half days. A billion seconds equals 32 years. A trillion seconds equals 32,000 years. And we're talking about a 2 trillion, a nearly $2 trillion bill. That is the entire budget of the United States of America.
That's a lot of zeros. That's a lot of zeros, Larry.
Okay, so that's the carrot. Here's the stick. The Equality Act, HR 5. That's going to be used, in my opinion, as the stick to whip into shape the conservatives, the Christians, the Jewish people, and the Muslims, because it's going to force us to open up our churches to people that are of the LGBT persuasion, even on our staff, even though it violates our biblical view, our Holy Scriptures view if you're Jewish, or even the Quran view. And what is so frightening about it, it basically eliminates the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993, also shortened for REFRA, which was so fought for so hard to protect the Christians and the Jewish people and the Muslim people, so they could honor the religion and everybody would get along. But this goes around that. Okay, so we got the carrot, we got the stick, and now we got the coronation. The coronation, enshrining one party rule for everything in the United States, that's HR 1. Every bad practice that happened in the November 2020 election is going to be put into statute. Nationwide mail-in voting, nationwide ballot harvesting, bans voter ID, nationwide motor voter registration, on and on. I could go on and on that. But here's the fourth punch that I just thought of. And the fourth punch is the coup de grace of the United States of America. And that's they are planning to take away our Second Amendment rights. That's the right to own guns. The purpose of the Second Amendment was to protect us, our families, but also to protect us against a tyrannical government. If they get all of our guns away, there'll be nothing, and I mean nothing, to stop the total takeover of our country. And that, to me, is the four punches and you're knocked out.
So I think that there is obviously some very strong opposition to those four punches, and that's what makes them issues worthy of discussion. Is there's there are very strong voices on both sides of the issues that you've just mentioned, and it also brings to mind how important it is, as we've discussed in the past, that we have a marketplace of ideas to discuss the opposing views. And many of the viewers and many of the listeners are smart enough to want to hear all of the viewpoints, but they also want to hear all of the news. And I'm sort of queuing up who we're going to have for the second half in just a minute. But that has become one of the most important things that we can be discussing at all. Is people hear about, the Equality Act, they don't know what it is, they don't know what their position is on it, they have absolutely no idea what the text of it says, and it's only by knowing what's in it that everybody forms their own opinion. And there are, of course, two strong dueling narratives on almost anything that we discuss. But the other thing is we really are in awe of those people who are brave enough to do what needs to be done to make sure that the American people have the information that they need. I mean, knowledge is power, and I don't know about you, but we always talk before we go to the ballot box. We want to read both sides of everything. We want to actually read a bill instead of just hearing people sort of give a highlights reel and skewed one way or another. I mean, and it's ironic, Larry, because that's what you and I do as lawyers is, you are
Yes,
paid to present a side of a controversy in a certain light. But we
right.
also cannot misrepresent. We have to be truthful. And then, hey, let the jury, the American people, they make up their minds. But it's that being truthful aspect of it that we are going to hear about in the second half of the show, because we are going to bring someone on that actually has risked life and limb to ensure that there is footage available of what goes on where. And Larry, we've talked about over the course of the last year all of the different types of protests and riots and things that go on overnight when most of us are sleeping that aren't covered by mainstream media, largely because there's a safety issue. No one wants reporters being risking their lives to capture some of this footage. But folks, don't touch that dial, because we have someone the other side of the break who has done exactly that. One of the bravest reporters there is, who's literally put his life on the line to bring you the footage that you just can't see elsewhere. So it's also going to be somebody, here's a little clue, who you probably have heard of. Stay with us. You're listening to Today with Dr. Wendy. We'll be back in a flash. Welcome back. You're listening to Today with Dr. Wendy. I'm Wendy Patrick. So, throughout the somewhat peaceful, sometimes not so peaceful protests last summer, and even from before, many of us have become familiar with groups that really want to reform versus groups that claim they want to reform. We've become familiar with the social justice issues. We have been really inundated with more news than we probably ever had before over the course of the last year. But we sometimes wonder whether we're always getting the full picture, the full story, because after all, everybody knows it can be very dangerous for journalists to actually go into the heat of battle to capture some of the footage in some of the hot zones. But not everybody is afraid, or shall I say, there are some that are willing to risk it to show people what really goes on, especially in areas that most people are afraid to go. We have somebody like that on the line right now who has literally risked life and limb to give the world an inside glimpse of what really goes on at some of these protests turned deadly. Larry, who do we have on the line?
Yes, Wendy. Andy Ngo is an American journalist, best known for his covering protests, riots in Portland, Oregon. He's written columns in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, and he's been on Fox News. And he's a very brave young man. He drew national attention when he was attacked by Antifa on the streets of Portland in the summer of 2019. And he's recently published the book. It's called Unmasked: Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy, that exposes Antifa for who they really are. His book is the #1 bestseller on Amazon in the category of local US politics, and I believe it's #3 in the New York Times bestseller list. Quite an accomplishment for a young man. So welcome to the show, Andy.
So, Andy, I'm going to start with a very sort of endearing, practical question. So, I am a big fan of time management, having enough time to do everything in the course of a day. And although, my job is not nearly as dangerous as yours, many of our listeners struggle with, gosh, how can I get it all done? And when do I sleep? And how much do I sleep? You have always struck me as somebody that is filming all night. You are somebody that actually is awake when everybody else is asleep, which is why you're actually able to capture the footage that nobody else sees. So I have to ask, how do you do it? When do you sleep? What is your sort of your pattern to be able to give you the enormous, almost unending amount of energy that you have?
That's right. Andy, how did you become interested in Antifa? And kind of a two-part question, who's behind it? Mm,
You know,
well,
Andy, the what you've just described, and particularly the assault that you endured, yet you went right back out and did more of the same. You went right back out into the heat of battle, into the danger zone with your camera, ready to continue to record. Where does that drive come from? I mean, is it faith? Is it how would you characterize your resilience? I mean, absolute resilience in every sense of the word.
Yes. Hey, Andy, I don't know if you're comfortable answering this, but is there a connection in your mind between Antifa and Black Lives Matter? Are they totally separate and they operate separately?
You know, we're at the end of the show, Andy, but I just wanted to thank you for what you do in terms of for covering and for documenting so much that goes on that, while everyone else is safe in their homes with their kids getting ready for the next day, you're out there with your camera just documenting, being the journalist that you are and the brave journalist you are. So we want to thank you very much for coming onto the show with us. We know you probably have I made the joke, interviews lined up after this probably all weekend long. But thank you so much, Andy, for being with us.
Thank you, Andy.
And thank you to our listeners who have been listening to Today with Dr. Wendy. Always so much to talk about. It's hard to fit it in, but we are always about headlines with a silver lining. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful, safe rest of your weekend. We will be back next week for more of Today with Dr. Wendy. Headlines with a silver lining. Have a great week and God bless you.